How is it rocking, Dwayne Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dwayne Nation and the brand that is Dwayne Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dwayne Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo. Genoa, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Justin, but not as good as these losers we're about to talk about, Justin. I mean, they just did not have a good draft at all. I mean, I talk about head scratching, table slapping. I mean, grunting just, I'm ready to talk about how I am just disappointed with these teams, not only just on the field, but fantasy too, Justin.
Yeah, so I agree. We just talked about winners in our last episode. We're on to the losers. Head scratching is an understatement. I was like this sometimes, especially night one, which we will dive into, and we will waste no time because we got a lot to talk about because we got a number of losers in this NFL draft. Um, since you started us off last time, I will start us off this time at my number 5 loser of the NFL draft. I had the Carolina Panthers. So, Carolina, they addressed some needs, of course. Now, the problem I had with them is that they traded up into the first round. Good for them. They moved up one spot. They get Xavier Legette, who I guess they were pretty high on. Had a phenomenal uh, last season with the South Carolina Gamecocks. But this is his 5th season, and he had done nothing for 4 years. Nothing. It was very very minimal, and then he breaks out with Spencer Rattler and that SEC squad. But it just history would not be on the side of Legette working out for the Panthers. And I want to bring up something else too. Legette, his skill set fits a quarterback that can sling the rock, like a Josh Allen, something like that. They could just launch the ball for Legette to get up and grab it. But Bryce
Yeah.
Young is not that quarterback. Bryce Young is a facilitator. He gets it out to you guys when he needs to, very accurate. But
Yeah.
that's not Legette's. That's not where Legette will, be a great piece for. And they had to trade up for it. Makes me a little off on it, especially because A.D. Mitchell was there. I even like Keon Coleman, and you could argue Lad McConkey over Legette. So I was a little off by that pick. Then they move to
Yeah.
their next pick. They get, you could argue, is the top running back in the draft. I had him at 2. Jonathan Brooks coming off the injury, and as much as they're trying, bring in some youth for Bryce Young, another really good piece for them. They have I don't hate the running back room. Chuba played a pretty good role last year. Miles Sanders, they paid him big money. It hasn't worked out, but they just have more areas that they could have addressed instead of doing so. They were right after the cornerback run, which is unfortunate. Hopefully, like that could have been something they could have addressed.
Yeah.
Obviously, all that run happened with DeJean, Kool-Aid, Kamari, Melton, Max Melton. So the Panthers miss out on that, and they go for a top running back, which is exciting. But I just didn't think that was their biggest need, especially because they need so many things. So I was not a huge fan of that. Trayvon Wallace is fine, nothing too big there. They picked him over guys like Jeremiah Trotter, which I was thinking that I know Trotter dropped to the 5th, but that's a couple people I had over him. And then I did like Jatavion Sanders. They have Tommy Trimble in that tight end room, but it's pretty dry after that. So they bring in a guy that could be a good pass catcher for Bryce Young. So yeah, but it just kind of at the top of it. I didn't like Legette. Brooks is a good player, just not something they really needed. And so I was off of what the Panthers did. Obviously, they didn't have a first rounder because of the Bryce Young trade last year to move up to 1. But they come away from the draft still needing a lot of things. And that's what I have them as my 5th loser of the draft. What are your thoughts with the Panthers?
Yeah, Justin, I don't really hate what the Panthers did. I do agree with you in some aspects. But, I guess to trade at the end and get Leggett at the end of the first round was a tad bit of a steal. Not a steal, but a little bit of a reach, actually. It was a steal, but a reach. I just feel like there's so many other players you could have gone. Maybe you could have traded back and got some more picks. One thing though that I am noticing is that they didn't get any offensive linemen, Justin, and a team
Hmm.
that's one of the worst teams in the NFL. Bryce Young had a terrible rookie season. And he was just unable to make anything happen. He does have a pretty good running game, able to get out the pocket, but Justin, they get no offensive lineman. They go running back, no, they go wide receiver, running back, linebacker, tight end, corner, defensive tackle, and then linebacker. They didn't get one lineman, even if it's from the worst school in college. I mean, you need to get some protection for your franchise quarterback, a guy that you traded, the farm for, to draft him with Chicago, and so it's a little disappointing that yes, they didn't get offensive line. I do like that though that they got my guy Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, and then they got another Texas guy with Sanders at the tight end position. But it doesn't seem like they're taking the right step forward. It does seem like they might be in the same position. Hopefully not that they were last year. I do like Dave Canales now as the new head
Right.
coach, but I just do feel like Justin they had to get a little bit bigger up front at the offensive line. It was loaded, Justin, with the offensive line. I'm just disappointed that they didn't get one guy there for their franchise quarterback. So I do see why. I would say after the only picks I do like are the two guys out of Texas. I mean, I call me biased. I love my Longhorns. Those are the only two picks that I really enjoyed. I do think Leggett could have went in the second or third round. If A.D. Mitchell, Justin, went in the second, third round, this guy would have probably went into the same. I do think, the Longhorns were better offensively than South Carolina was. And so, it's very underwhelming. You expected the Panthers to take a step forward with last year's number one pick. So I do see why, though, they're on your, biggest losers.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, you cover that, and now I want to hear you cover the fifth loser for you.
Yeah, I'm doing the 49ers. I think that with the 49ers, after the Super Bowl, there's just an ugly taste in everybody's mouth with San Francisco. I feel like, off the bat, there's issues with Ayuk. And now, Justin, there's an issue now with Debo. They're thinking of trading Debo now. And I feel like
Mhm.
that just, kills a little bit of team chemistry. We're not sure if George Kittle is going to be that guy at the tight end position now, so he struggled this past playoffs. And so, and one thing that I did notice, look, I do like Brock Purdy, right? And I do think he's the guy going forward, of course. But I just think that San Francisco should have drafted a quarterback, not in the first three rounds, maybe in the fourth or fifth. I mean, there was guys like Milton, guys like Rattler, guys, that went undrafted. You mentioned Pratt, who you liked. I do think Pratt could have been a fit on this team, Justin. And so I'm just a little bit, I'm not too happy. And then at the end of that third, they did get Ricky Pearsall, who I think is going to be good. But I just have to believe that it leaves a bad taste in those two receivers in San Francisco with Ayuk and Debo. I feel like now they might be looking and going to the season with a bad taste in the mouth. So overall in San Francisco, it's not looking good. And then on the defensive side, yes, they did sign Leonard Floyd, but I do think they need young talent on the edge. They just got rid of Chase Young, who they traded for just in midseason. You were thinking that
Right.
maybe they were going to extend Chase Young, but he goes to the Saints now. And now you're missing some pass rushing now. A team that had a pretty D line to pressure Mahomes in the Super Bowl is now lacking. And they didn't really address that
Yep.
in the draft as well. They didn't get, a pass rusher at all. They did get a linebacker with their last pick of their draft in the seventh round. And it's just disappointing. And they do have Trent Williams, who is getting up there in age. He is the best tackle in the game considered. They did extend them, so it causes a little bit of confusion as why they would go Dominic Puni in the third round. Just a little bit confusing there. I just feel like they should have addressed a little bit more D line, a little bit more, I would say of the quarterback play. Maybe do what Kansas City did, Justin, getting another tight end to possibly be the guy to take over after Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is miles ahead of George Kittle. I do think they're about the same
Right.
age, but I think Kittle is just up there with injuries. It's just lag, and I think he's starting to slow down. So it just kind of just 49ers, they're just losing my trust little by little. I do think the Rams now are better. I think Shanahan is starting to lose his edge as a head coach. Now, am I going to not pick McCaffrey? No, obviously I'll take McCaffrey if I
Right.
see Debo in the fifth or sixth round. I just don't feel like they made the proper adjustments to make another NFC Championship run, another Super Bowl run. It feels like now with this team on paper, I feel like Mahomes dices them up even more. And so even a Baltimore that destroys them on Christmas Day. Even a team like against the Texans, who now D'Amico Ryans has the edge coaching over Shanahan. And even on the NFC side, they did destroy Philly in that match, but I do think that Philly gets better. I don't know if Dallas gets better, but there's some other teams now in the NFC that I think that can challenge the 49ers. I just don't think the 49ers made the proper adjustments after making the Super Bowl. So I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit concerned for San Francisco.
Yeah, so you had him at 5. I have him actually as my second biggest
Yeah.
loser. So I'll talk about him here, even though they're at my 2. Um, the thoughts of it is that they reached on Ricky Pearsall. As much as I liked him, I thought he was a day 2 guy pretty firmly. They trade up for him. Now, I'm hoping actually that since they didn't trade Ayuk or Debo on draft night, I just hope that they just keep them and they can work it out somehow, because them 3 together is a really interesting offense. But if they decide to trade, one or two of those guys, then it really goes downhill for that wide receiver room. And then looking at, Renardo Green, solid. I think it was a little bit of a reach there at corner. And then Dominic Pooney, even though he's listed as a tackle, I've actually watched his stuff, and he's actually more of a guard, which is interesting. I thought, honestly, that they were going to address tackle because Trent Williams is getting older, and they might, they find a good future replacement, a successor for him. They don't really do that. And then obviously they get their every year, every other year mid-round running back. If it's not Tyrion Davis-Price or Elijah Mitchell, this year it's Isaac Guarendo out of Louisville, who was him and Jawar Jordan were tag team. And people actually have good grades on Guarendo, but they have some running backs in that backfield. He might surpass expectations, but only what happened due to an injury to CMC. And then Jacob Cowing out of Arizona, a smaller wide receiver. That's their second guy they draft. If they don't trade one of those wide receivers, the top 2 guys, Cowing kind of is a major depth piece. And so just nothing too powerful from the Niners in this draft. And as you mentioned in our last episode, the Rams, after having a really successful draft and the Niners having opposite of that, makes that division very interesting at who could be the top at the end of the regular season, who could win that division. The Rams are riding on a little bit of momentum at the moment, while the Niners didn't look too pretty. And then same with the Chiefs. This recent Super Bowl, very close game, goes to OT, but the Chiefs now are looking well past what the Niners are putting together. And, with things just kind of seem to be melting down with Ayuk, and then they're throwing Debo into trade conversations when we hadn't heard anything about that, makes me think they might be panicking a little. And then the draft didn't really help them out with, settling, issues they have on that roster. So, yeah, I had them at 2. You had them at 5. We both think they're losers, which makes me worried for them big time. So, actually, I'm going to jump to you. Who is your 4th loser of the NFL draft?
I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, Justin. I know they went offensive line to start the draft, their draft, getting Amarius Mims. But after that, Justin, they did not address offensive line. And I think, Justin, out of all 32 teams in the NFL, the Cincinnati Bengals are the most desperate as far as offensive line. I mean, everything that they've done the past couple of years have not transitioned into protecting Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has played 4 seasons and has had 2 season-ending injuries in 2 of them. He was able to make the Super Bowl, but Justin, in that Super Bowl, he was pressured. Facing a team that had Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd and Von Miller. They weren't able to learn from it. And even in the next year where they faced the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, they weren't able to get as best protection for Burrow as possible. And it just frustrates me a little bit with the Bengals. They are having some issues with T. Higgins, their second best playmaker. They just got rid of Joe Mixon. They didn't address running back at all, Justin. They didn't get a running back. They did sign Zach Moss, but Justin, Zach Moss can only do so much. He hasn't really had, he did good Colts for those couple years, couple games. When Taylor was hurt. But I still feel like if the Eagles were able to get a running back after signing Saquon, I don't understand why Cincinnati couldn't have done it. The franchise, the management and the ownership, they aren't ran the best. I do think they hit the lottery with getting Jamar and Burrow in back-to-back drafts. But other than that, it's just, they're very cheap. They're very, stingy with paying their players. They don't have the best, team building morale. And the fact that they didn't get a much offensive line really already makes them the biggest loser because, Burrow has been hurt. He's a great quarterback, but he gets hurt easily. He is a big guy, but he's the type of guy that one bad sack, it puts him out for the year. And it's happened already twice in his career. They're just really lazy with that. I did like the fact that they did get Burton, but in the third round, Justin is an oversell. A.D. Mitchell went in the third. So I don't think Burton is a third round guy. He has some off the field issues, but I do think Burton's going to be good. I just don't think he's automatically NFL ready. They also got two tight ends, which Eric All is okay, and I like Tanner McLaughlin. I'm saying his name wrong, but I just feel like there's other ways for them to address it. Also, I do think that Trey Hendrickson wants out of Cincinnati. I think he's threatening retirement. So they did get an edge, and they waited all the way to the 6th round. I do like Cedric Johnson, but I mean, it just seemed like they were just a little bit careless in this draft. I just feel like Jermaine Burton could have fell all the way to the 6th round, right around Brendan Rice. I just don't think Burton was highly talked about, highly looked at, and it's just a little sad because I love the Bengals. I love Jamar Chase. He's one of my favorite players in this league. I'm a big fan of Burrow, but it's just that division is loaded as well, Justin. So I feel like they should have just been a little bit more aggressive. I just don't think they were ready for this draft. So that's kind of why they're at my 4th spot of being one of the worst teams in this year's draft.
I like what you're saying. Or I hear what you're saying, and I'm gonna have a little bit of a different take on it because I didn't hate the draft. They look. Hearing you make me think that they're a little bit more of a loser than what I first thought.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at the Bengals, obviously they have they caught lightning in a bottle a few years ago, made a Super Bowl. After that, it's kind of been downhill. Obviously, last year was derailed by injuries for just about the whole team. And now T. Higgins is requesting a trade, and Trey Hendrickson's requesting a trade. I can already tell you my early, Super Bowl prediction is falling from grace with this, and their draft wasn't super special. If you look at it, Amarius Mims is a good pick there. I like him. He's a huge offensive lineman. The thing is, he only started 8 games at right tackle for Georgia, so I view him as more of a raw prospect that they could build up. Which they're in a win now mode though, which makes it interesting. Now they signed Trent Brown in the offseason, a tackle that Mims will replace pretty shortly because they have Orlando Brown on the other side. So their O-line is, to me, it's fine. They get Chris Jenkins, who I like, to replace DJ Reader. So I was a fan of that pick for them because Michigan talent, very strong piece. Burton, I do like. I think people were off of him because of the off the field issues, some just character concerns. If they groom him right, or they bring him up correctly, hopefully Jamar Chase can be a good mentor. Things go well, and then for fantasy, which we'll talk about on our next episode, things could be very good for him if they trade T. Higgins. As much I'm an Aggie, I bleed maroon. I didn't like the McKinley Jackson pick there at the end of the 3rd. I thought he was dropped into the 5th round. The Bengals get him, on day 2. And then I do like Cedric Johnson, as you mentioned. I did not get the 2 tight end draft picks. So there were a lot of issues in their selections throughout the weekend. I guess they are set at running back with Moss and Chase Brown, which is one of the weakest running back rooms now heading into the 2024 season. So it feels like they leave with more questions, or just they didn't answer enough questions. So I agree with you there. They are one of my lower graded draft teams, but you have them as a bigger loser, and I can see what you were putting down. So yeah, okay, yeah, definitely there. They're definitely falling under that list. At 3 for me, I had the Tennessee Titans. Their draft, obviously, I think most people had mocked to them Joe Alt in the with that 7 overall pick, which I was all on board with. And then the Chargers go and steal him at 5, and they go with J.C. Latham, which in my opinion, I think the Titans should have traded back a few spots just to get more capital, then get Latham, because Latham I
Yeah.
don't think was going in that top 10 area. So I think they reach a little on Latham. He does fill a role that they need, so I don't hate that pick. A pick I did not enjoy was Tavondre Sweat at 30, at the sixth pick in the second
Yeah.
round. He's a good piece. He's just his size and weight could be a concern. I know he's huge, and you like that. You want a big aggressive person, but he needs to actually get the weight a little bit down. And then of course the DUI issue. Hopefully that is just like a one-off mistake, and he learns from it. That's nothing to do with it. Hopefully nothing to do with
Yeah.
his character concerns. And then after that, it's nothing too special. Cedric Gray in the fourth is solid. I'm not a big fan of Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I didn't think he was a great cornerback talent. And then the rest of it is just nothing too much. They address needs, I guess, at each of those picks at the end, but it's not like they're not just great picks in the talent of the players themselves. So it was just kind of meh in a division where every team kind of upgraded. Houston, we thought were good winners. I think the Colts deserve to be winners
Yep.
with stealing A.D. Mitchell, which I will say you said third. He did go in the second. And then the Jaguars getting Brian Thomas was a good thing there. So I think the teams around them kind of improved, and they improved, but it just not to the degree that the other teams did. So I have them as my third biggest loser. What are your thoughts with the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, I don't think they're the biggest loser, but I do see why. I do think they should have. They did add some for their defense. I think their defense is lacking. I do think they should have been more aggressive to make some trades. They didn't really pick that much. I don't have too much of a big of an issue with Tennessee. I think they did a lot during free agency already, and also what they already had. So I don't have an issue with Tennessee. Um, I just feel like they should have been a little bit more aggressive between rounds 3 and 6. I feel like they could have done more to add to a defense that isn't established at all. Probably one of the more unknown defenses in all of the league. I would say so. They didn't pick the most flashiest defensive guy, but they did get Sweat. They did get Cedric Gray. So I do think those are some building blocks to go forward in Tennessee.
All right, yeah, all right. Well, throw me your two
So
of biggest losers.
So Justin, actually, I just made a quick audible. I did have the Cowboys in there, but I'm going to take them off because they did get a lot of offensive line help. They didn't really address the running backs as best as I thought they should, or the wide receiver. That's okay. They did address offensive line defense, so I'm going to take them off and I'm going to replace them with the Jets. Now, with the
Wow.
Jets, you have Aaron Rodgers coming off injury, right? They did just get rid of Zach Wilson. So after Aaron Rodgers and no Zach Wilson, they draft Jordan Travis, who I like. I like Jordan Travis, but now you have two injured quarterbacks to start the year off with Rodgers and Travis. And it's just kind of an odd quarterback room. I like their first round pick. They got Olu Fashanu, who's going to be good. But then, I like Malachi Corley, who we talked about, but I just don't think he fits the Jets system, coached by Robert Saleh. They do have Mike Williams to go along with Garrett Wilson. I just feel like Malachi could have fit anywhere else, just but the Jets. They don't have the offensive scheme. Um, and so I don't think, that is going to be a fit. But then also, we love Brees Hall, and he's going to be a top running back in this league. But then they draft two running backs with Braylon Allen, who I like, and Isaiah Davis, who I'm not too familiar with. But, it's just a little bit confusing on why you get a guy like Braylon Allen, who I think has, star potential, and have him behind Brees Hall. It's going to be a little bit of a running back committee, which I don't like at all, Justin. I think that now Brees Hall loses a little bit of his value on third down situations, which is a key for me there. And also, I don't understand Stiggers, the cornerback out of Toronto, I'm saying it wrong, but I understand why you get a guy out of the Toronto Football League. I don't know if that's a college. I've never even heard of that. It is in the fifth round, but I mean, there's so many other people you can go in the fifth round. And I don't think they address defense as best as they could. They don't really have an established defense. They do play pretty well. They did have like an upset win against Philly when they were undefeated. They won with defense through that game, but this is not a defense that I don't think Aaron Rodgers can work with. And so they didn't really address defense at all. until the fifth round. I mean, they went all offense, which doesn't make sense. You have Rodgers, you have Brees Hall, you have Garrett Wilson. They didn't even go for a tight end there. There's no established tight end with the Jets. So it just doesn't, these are good players. Some of them are, but it's just not the right fit for what's already there in New York. You have two injured quarterbacks, a defense that didn't even, there were no improvements. When you did pick defense, it was a guy out of somewhere we've never even heard of. You get two running backs when you already have a star running back. I mean, Justin, this is not like Cincinnati where you don't really have a star running back. That I would understand if Braylon Allen would go. But you already have Brees, who's fantastic, and you had two running backs. It doesn't make sense. And so, I'm not really, the Jets are probably still going to be pretty decent, pretty good. But as far as the draft, they are one of the biggest losers.
I kind of agree with what you're telling me right here. I've grown a little bit on the Olu Fashanu draft pick at 11. I thought they were going to go Brock Bowers because you mentioned they do need tight end. They only got Tyler Conklin in that tight end room. But they get Fashanu, who, they draft. I mean, they signed some free agents that are solid in that offensive line, for their schemes. But I think Fashanu can fit in there and be good for Rodgers. And then Corley, I agree. I don't love the fit with the Jets. I love the talent, but the fit doesn't ring bells for me. Same with Braylon Allen. You mentioned they got Brees Hall. They got one of the best running backs in the league, and they decide to go a big boy running back in Braylon Allen. Who? What are you going to put Braylon Allen? Because Braylon Allen's not a big pass catcher, but he's a hard nosed, first down, second down runner. You're not going to put him over Brees Hall. And they have Izzy Abanikanda, who they drafted last year, but they decided to bring in another running back in Isaiah Davis, and then Jordan Travis. I kind of like it because I know he's injured, but he doesn't have to play for maybe a year or two. But if they can develop him well, he could become the starter because we like him.
Sure.
But it's fine. It doesn't help a win now team. Um, I will say I disagree with you on one thing that they needed. I think they should have gone all out on offense, which they kind of did, but they didn't do it where I really wanted them to because their defense is amongst the best in the league. I think they were fine there, but the offense they didn't attack where I wanted them to. They didn't need running back, but they decided, use two of their, what is this, 9 picks on running backs.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense. Or oh my God, 7 picks. 2 of them are running backs. It's kind of questionable. So I agree. I'm glad you made that audible because the Jets, it wasn't super great for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely not wonderful. So my 2 was the Niners, as we talked about earlier. So I'll just jump to my 1, and I have some problems with this team and what they were thinking. I'm talking about the Atlanta Falcons. People are trying to make excuses for why Penix could be good at 8, and I just don't understand it. Penix is a great talent. I like the talent of Penix, but for the Falcons, you had no need to do that. You just signed Kirk Cousins to $100 million guaranteed, $180 million 4-year deal. You needed edge rusher. Dallas Turner is staring you right in the face. You decide to go elsewhere and pick a quarterback who the GM comes out and says he doesn't have to start for 4 years. The guy is already 23, 24 years old. He's going to be 27, 28 by the time he starts. Why would you do that, especially at the 8 overall pick? It just didn't click for me, and I don't think it'll ever will. I feel bad for Penix because he's not going to start for so long. Kirk Cousins is still a good quarterback. And then people were comparing it to the Green Bay situation where the Packers picked Jordan Love. It's so different because one, they picked in the 20s. This is the 8th overall pick we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And they decide to go with their future, their believed future at quarterback. And if you think he's not going to start for a handful of years, in 2 to 3 years, there's going to be another quarterback for you guys to pick up. I just
Yeah.
did not get it. For a team that's win now in a weak division, they decide to look to the future. It just didn't make sense for me. That started off a chain of where I was just not on board with a lot of their picks. I feel bad for Penix. He might be getting a lot of crap right now. It's not his fault. It's the Falcons' fault. Don't listen. I've heard rumors that it's the owner's decision. Don't listen to the owner. The owner doesn't know what he's talking about. We're talking about, GMs here who are making and scouts. Listen to your scouts. Listen to what the team needs. know what's around you with these other teams. It just did not make sense for the Falcons. Um, Penix, though, if he ever gets to start, he'll have a good situation around him. I was even behind them picking Roma Dunze. I could have been behind that because Mooney's a fine receiver too, but they could have brought in a star like that. But instead, they go quarterback, and I'm lost. I'm just at a loss of. I'm just at confusion levels right now, and I don't see why that's a great idea. And lastly, too, with that, Penix, I know he's healthy now, but he's had injury history for a number of times. You get him at 8 overall, and you just didn't need it. You just didn't need to do that. I don't know if you like hate the Raiders and just wanted to steal it from them, but yeah, just not behind what Atlanta did there. And then with Rook Orahoro, I don't even know. I hope I'm pronouncing that
Yeah.
correctly. I think he's a fine talent, but you pick him when Johnny Newton's on the board. Why would you do that? Braylon Trice is a fine pickup there in the third. Dorless is fine. And then you pick up a running back, which whatever. Jason McClellan is fine. It was nothing exciting. And then clearly the biggest shock of the night when I was telling people about this, that was me. I was in a room watching with some friends, and we were all just like, "What?" And we
Yeah.
will continue to be doing that. I'm not sure any explanation can really get me behind the move for the Falcons. If you really, they could have even traded back a few spots to get Dallas Turner, get more picks. I was really behind that move. At least getting an edge rusher or some defensive presence at the line because that's what they needed now. But they decided to look into however long, and they make a mistake with the Falcons. What do you thought? What do you think? My rant is over.
Justin, I'm not gonna lie to you. I have a huge amount of mixed feelings with the Falcons. I have a lot of good, but there's like a lot of low. It's a lot of good, a lot of bad. Here's the thing with Penix. I do think Michael Penix does fit in Atlanta. I do think he has the swagger, the confidence, and the playmaking ability to play with the players that they already have with the Falcons. However, I agree with you. I don't understand the pick all the way. Maybe if you paid Kirk Cousins 2 years, 60 million, yes, but the contract was massive. It was 4 years, and now Justin, you have a starting quarterback in Kirk Cousins, who is now a little bit insecure, now a little bit unhappy, and has not even practiced yet with the team. Practices have not even started. And another thing, Justin, that worries me is you needed that cornerstone player on your defense. You know what I'm saying? What my Texans did last year, they got the quarterback and then they got the defensive player to lead them for many years. And I do think Dallas Turner felt very Falcons ready, felt like the guy to lead the Falcons. And the Falcons have some decent players on defense. You know, they do have Grady Jarrett and Jesse Bates, but they do need that one guy to make them stand out. And Dallas Turner was that guy to fit in Atlanta with a team that has an offensive ready team. And now they have a defensive minded head coach. I just thought it was a no brainer to pick Dallas Turner. And so it's a little bit confusing. And in the second round, I like Rook or Horo, but I think that was a little bit of a reach. I think he would have been able to fall the third or fourth round for sure. Braylon Trice, I think that was a good pick. But for them to get two defensive tackles already with having Grady Jarrett, for them to, I do understand the linebacker pick. I don't think they should have picked running back at all. They do have Bijan and Tyler Algier. Jace McMillan is pretty good. He was pretty solid back at Bama. I don't understand why they would get a running back. Some teams, they didn't address any position at all. And I feel like Atlanta was a team that shouldn't have addressed running backs at all. It should have been more of a defensive minded draft for them. And they picked a good amount of defensive players. I would have liked them, though, to focus a little bit on their secondary, maybe a safety or two when I've heard, maybe another corner, in that secondary for Atlanta. I feel like they should have really approached this draft with saying, hey, we have the offense. Let's make the defense. Kind of like what Philly did. They got two corners. They got an edge rusher. They got a linebacker there. And same thing with Green Bay. But the Falcons weren't a team that did it. They picked multiple defensive tackles, 3 to be exact, and 4 total D linemen. Doesn't make sense. And for them to take Penix, and I like Penix. We love him. But in Atlanta, to have him wait is a head scratcher, and there's a couple now minor issues now going on in the ATL, which I hope they get it solved.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 2 defensive tackles. They double dipped in the wrong spot. They should have double dipped at edge rusher, which they needed more. I know their defensive tackle room is it's got a good talent, but they're just older vets, so they could fought for some replacements, which is fine. That's what they did. But that's not where I don't know. They just look too much into the future when now is when they need to seize the moment. With it seems like the Panthers at the bottom of the barrel trying to build themselves up. The Saints are kind of in the middle ground. We don't know what's up with them, and then the Buccaneers as well. They're at a point where I think they'll have Baker for a year or two, and then they just kind of call shop and rebuild because Mike Evans will retire in a few years. This is now when you need to make your stance and become the top team in that division. But it did not happen for them. But I don't mean to cut this right here. I'm not going to cut it. I just got a breaking news alert that Tank Dell was shot in Florida, but he's in the hospital right now. Or
Oh,
he was just
snap.
released from the hospital. Should be okay. Should make full recovery. But oh my goodness, that is some crazy news. I hope he's okay.
He's out of the hospital?
It says he's expected to make a full recovery and has been released from the hospital, but he was shot in Florida by somebody. That is some crazy stuff right there. Guys, oh my goodness. I hope he's okay. Prayers to him and his family.
Yeah.
I hope it wasn't something not and I hope nobody else was injured from this. We're going to be talking about that. Hopefully we get some more news soon.
Yeah.
Um, wow, that is some wild news. I hope okay, anyway, hopefully Tank Dell is okay. Hopefully we can things come out and everything's
Yeah.
okay, especially with what happened. It says there was a mass shooting, so this is some wild stuff. Prayers to everybody
Yeah.
there. Okay, but anyway,
Wow.
back on topic. I know that's some pretty deep news. But now that the Falcons are, I'm done talking about the Falcons. We're done talking about the Falcons as my biggest loser. Who is your biggest loser?
My biggest loser, we're at 4 here, or
Number one, your top
number
guy.
1. My top biggest loser has to be the Raiders, Justin. Now, look, I understand they did get the best tight end in the draft, and look, I'm a big Brock Bowers fan, but Justin, you're going to now be heading into the season with Gardner Minshew and O'Connell as your quarterbacks in a division that has Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, and Justin Herbert. It's very head scratching that the Raiders didn't even approach quarterback at all. But Justin, we are in the NFL. This is the new era of the NFL. You have to have a good quarterback to make the
Yep.
playoffs, but even win you at least 9 games a year. If you don't have that guy, you're going to be the worst team year in and year out. And a team in a city like Vegas that has the offense with Devontae Adams and now Brock Bowers, and they did lose Josh Jacobs, but I do like the potential of Zamir White. It's a little odd, and I do like Max Crosby to be one of the favorites for Defensive Player of the Year, and they weren't able to add much to the D line to go along with him, and so looking at the draft here, they go tight end, which is great. They go center, Jackson Powers Johnson. I think that's a great pick. They get another offensive lineman, and yes, I get it, but for who? What quarterback are you trying to protect here? They do go corner, which I think that they needed a linebacker. They ended up getting one, which it's not bad. But they get another running back at a Dylan Law, who I've never really heard of. They get a safety out of the Air Force, and they get another corner. They get two corners that aren't really were at the top 10. Just a couple head scratching picks. But the biggest thing here is they didn't get a quarterback, and they didn't get a running back that is like a Braylon Allen that you can get in the 4th or 5th round. It's a little bit disappointing. The running back out of Tennessee, who I like, I think is Wright. I think he was a good fit for them. They didn't even look his way. So just a little bit of a confusing draft for the Raiders. I'm a big Antonio Pierce fan, but his first draft wasn't, the brightest after the 2nd round pick. So I feel like the first 2 picks are great. I mean, they started off great, but then Justin, I feel like they went absolutely downhill and finished as one of the biggest losers. It's not like the Chargers where they started off a little bit questionable and actually ended up great. It was like with the Raiders, they ended up great, but ended up just worse. And the reason why they're the biggest loser to me, Justin, and I just mentioned this, but they're in a division with the reigning champions and the best quarterback in the league. They had to have been aggressive this draft to get their quarterback of the future. They could have traded up for Penix. I mean, Penix was obviously going to go top 11. They were picking at 13. There's no way Bo Nix or Penix was going to make it to 13. I just don't believe that was going to be a thing. And they weren't aggressive at all, Justin. They didn't even trade picks until the 6th round. I mean, you would have liked for Vegas to be a little bit aggressive. You mentioned, or I've mentioned, or I've heard that Antonio Pierce and Crosby, saying like, oh, we want to be the one to take down the Chiefs. With this draft, I just feel like Mahomes is just in his living room laughing. I mean, there's no competition in that division to take down Mahomes. So, I mean, no quarterback in this draft, not even one for the Raiders, makes them the biggest loser, in my opinion.
I think that they are one of the biggest losers in this draft. I honestly, okay, you get the best tight end in the draft, a generational piece. A lot of people are saying you just didn't need it. I know Michael Mayer didn't make a huge impact in his rookie year, but rookie tight ends don't usually make big impacts, except a handful of them. I think Mayer would have been just fine as their top guy, but they decided to bring in another one. I guess they're going to be running a lot of 12 personnel sets this year, but they really needed O-line. Now they get JPJ at center, huge pickup. I really liked that for them, but they need tackle. They actually need just about everywhere else on the offensive line. They don't really address that, which makes me skeptical there. I don't like Delmar Glaze. I think that was a huge reach.
Mm.
I don't know. I just wasn't a huge fan of that one. You're right. It really went downhill after JPJ. DeCameron Richardson, no, he wasn't. I didn't hear too much from him. Eichenberg, I heard a few things, but I'm pretty sure Trotter was on the board or right around that area. They could have done that. Dylan Lobb doesn't change any. He's not a game changer there, and I guess they're buying into Zamir White, what he can become their workhorse. I didn't think he, kind of is set as a, good workhorse running back after having Josh Jacobs. And we know how much Pierce wants to run the football, so they're sticking with White and Madison and Lobb, or I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's another bad room. We talked about the Bengals. This one kind of ranks right around there, maybe even worse. So it's ugly, even though they're a team that wants to run the ball. That was kind of their identity over the back half of the year once Pierce became the head coach or the interim head coach. So they decided to get another pass catcher for Gardner Minshew. The biggest thing, them missing out on the quarterback game. I feel bad for them a little bit there because I don't think anybody expected the Falcons to do that at 8. But yeah, they should have traded up. 13 is not a pretty spot to just wait around for a franchise quarterback. And I know they were in on Penix. Why don't you just move up with Tennessee or with Atlanta there?
Yeah.
Unless they were just, if you think you got your franchise guy, trade up for him. Especially when you need one right now, unlike the Falcons. So Gardner is going to be their guy. He's fine. We saw him at the Colts. They almost made the playoffs this past season. So I think they're going to be a scrappy team, get some big wins, but some bad losses kind of thing. But yeah, in a division where, Jim Harbaugh is the new coach of the Chargers. They have Herbert, of course. They solidified their O-line. They got some wide receivers in their room now. And then, of course, the reigning champs. It's tough. It's tough for the Raiders. They're definitely
Yeah.
a loser. Brock Bowers, yes, great talent. I think they needed, they need somebody in the interior defensive line. I thought Byron Murphy could have been something for them. And then all of those tackles, outside of obviously what Fashanu, Latham, and Alt, who had gone already. But besides that, I mean, Fuaga, Fautanu, I mean, you had so many options, and they decided to go Brock Bowers, which is fine. And then they do get JPJ in the second. That was their kind of the biggest one where I was like, good job, Raiders. And then it just collapses. So yeah, that's a pretty
Yeah.
good pick there at 1. That wraps up our losers of the 2024 NFL draft. We got winners out and we got losers out. And after this, we want to discuss, in fantasy. Fantasy is what is one of our namesakes, talking about the impacts of how each player will be going into the 2024 season. So stay tuned for that episode. But thank you guys for listening to our winners and losers episodes. And we will catch you on the next episode of Doing Sports. Genoa, send us out.
Dwayne Nation, this has been a fun 2 episodes of draft recap. We're so excited to make more content. Just stick with us and hey, check out our TikTok because more is on the way.
That's right. TikTok is bumping. We are pumping out content just about every day. Really excited what we got on the TikTok so far. And yeah, we're just about everywhere. So check us out, and we'll continue to keep putting things out there. So thank you guys, and as we always say, peace.
Peace.